Hi, everyone, and welcome to Latinx Rising. I'm Robert.
And I'm Jasmine, and together we are passionate about exploring issues surrounding systems of oppression, racism, and colorism. These are stories that should be told by the people on the ground, working every day to make life better.
So yeah, my brothers and my sister are texting because since like an hour ago, they discovered that the boogie board boys or the surfer boys or whatever the hell those boys were that Trump was supposed to disavow in the debate. What are they called?
I mean, let's call a spade a spade. They're racist.
The racist,
New
whatever.
Ku Klux Klan rebranded boys.
Turns out one of the leaders is Cuban and mulatto.
So what is a mulatto?
A mulatto is like very dark skin. You know, I think most white supremacists would call a mulatto a black person.
And does this surprise you at all, as a Cuban, that a mulatto would be in charge of this group and not see a problem?
Is that a serious question? I know it's a serious question, but I can't. I mean, really, in our culture, it's just so. Yeah, no, he's not black. He's Cuban.
He's not black. He's Cuban. We have to laugh because if we don't laugh, we're gonna cry.
I'm telling you. He's not. She's not black. She's Cuban.
And
what?
When I saw that news too. Somebody sent it to me on my Instagram, and I feel like I've been saying this to people over and over again. Cubans are the exception in the Latino group. We're different in the way we vote, and the way we understand, and the way we see the world, and the way we express color. And my message on my TikTok has what's angered many Cubans is to point that kind of thing out. And I've never seen anything more Cuban that shows our problem. It is like a manifestation of our Cuban American problem that a mulatto Cuban.
I can't.
Okay. Let's stop it now. All right.
Why is it hysterical? I'm dizzy.
Why is it funny?
Because we are a minority. We're Hispanics. It's just so out of touch with reality. I don't have the words. It's sort of like watching the debate. It was like watching a train wreck, and the train is gonna wreck. It's gonna hit the other train or the other wall, but you can't take your eyes off of it. And our culture, as much as I love being half Cuban, and my mother was Cuban, and our bloodlines run from Spain and the whole thing, I know the history of racism. I know the history of where race and racism come from. And it was born in Spain, and then it went off to the Vatican, and then the Catholic Church and the Spanish Crown worked together to create races. And but it's like bred into our DNA to be racist or to be other. We are not like them. We are other,
It's a classification system. It is exactly what it was.
And it's like, as my mother would have said in Spanish, "Mija, cáete de la mata." Fall off that tree, because I don't know what branch you're hanging on, but you're on the wrong freaking tree, because that tree is full of Latinos and you're one of them,
But not only is this Latino, not a white Latino. This isn't Marco Rubio, okay? Which would be a shock to nobody, right? Like
have you seen the picture of the guy?
Yes, I have.
Very clean cut, but I can put
clean cut or not clean cut, but
no. But I'm saying the stereotypical, I'm saying he's mulatto, but yeah, I can still put him in a lineup.
Yes, you can.
So, and why am I mentioning that? Because how do the white supremacists accept him? Because you see, in our culture, we accept that he's not black, he's Cuban.
I
But
have
they
an
don't say that in Arkansas.
honestly, I have a theory that I can't back up with data, and I'm just going to let you know how I feel. I have this feeling, right, that a lot of other Latinos, they'll say, watch out, because the first one, like the Republicans, they're going to turn on you. They'll notice that you too, you're mulatto. They're going to notice that you are Latino. They're going to notice you're Hispanic, and they're going to come after you too. You're not any better than the rest of us, the Cubans who vote Republican, right?
I'm trying to follow you.
That there's this mentality that other Latinos on my TikTok, there's been a bit of an anger where they're like, why is it that Cubans vote Republican? Why? Right? Why? You've experienced that. And
But I get that constantly, those questions.
but one of their biggest counter arguments, or one of their biggest frustrations, is they're not going to see you as white. You could look white, you could talk white, you can act white. You're never going to be white to that person in Arkansas.
Who is saying that?
Let's say the progressive Latino base voice.
So a person who would come onto my TikTok or to my page and would say, I don't understand why Cubans vote for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And I respond, honey, it's because Cubans think they're white.
Mm-hmm. And then that person who would retort and say, but you're not white, or they'll never see you as white.
And correction. It's because we think we're white, because I'm half Cuban. So I'm not a they.
And I can accept that my skin color is white. This is a separate issue. But the issue that I'm talking about is that, for example, a mulatto Cuban is Cuban first, skin color second, right? He wants to assimilate first, wants to be accepted by the white man in America first before being Cuban. My opinion is the only way that this could have worked for this man. Any questions?
Yeah. No questions. No questions, because it's just.
But what I lost my train of thought. What I was trying to say is that, because people always say that to me on my TikTok, other Latinos, they say Cubans will, like, they're going to get their reckoning, right? Like Trump will, like the Republicans, they're going to turn on you because they're going to see that you're Hispanic. They're never going to accept you as one of them.
Okay. I'm following now. Keep going.
Right. And I used to agree with them, and now I disagree.
Yeah, because I don't see it. That's why I said I'm following, because I wanted to see where you were going to go with this, because I don't see the reckoning coming to Westchester or Hialeah or even parts of Coraguebo. They're not. Who's going to come reckon?
And you're getting that because you've been in the game much longer than I have. I'm coming from that millennial Gen Z mentality of, like, wait, hold up. Yeah, we're not any different. We're Latino. We're Hispanic. Trump would turn on us in a heartbeat if he could. But no, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. Absolutely not. We're part of the protected minority because we vote for him. We have this support. So when you ask me that question of why not him? Why don't they turn on him? They know that. I think the Republican base has accepted, on some level, Cubans as their own too.
What a freaking theory, woman. You've blown my mind, because
so I think we are different. I got chills a little bit.
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. I've never thought about that. Now that we're a couple of days away from the debate,
mm-hmm.
and I've been able to process information, it's interesting that you just said that, because one thing has nothing to do with what I'm about to say, but it's been crossing my mind in the past few hours that he's got to take anybody he can get.
Yeah.
At this point. And he's got to take anybody he can get.
Mm-hmm.
And if it means he's not going to, deny the racism, and if it means he's not going to say, I'm completely against racism and I don't stand for it, so that he gets that part of the base, he is so desperate at this point, and this is my personal opinion, that he will take what you just said. He'll take the mulatto who's in the group that they're accepting because they need the vote. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't give him that much credit. I would give his people that credit, but I mean, it's all over the
because
internet.
how does his base
over the internet.
West?
Pardon me?
How does his base react to Kanye West?
Don't they love him?
They love him. It's not an issue of race. He's accepted. He's one of them. So I think with this Cuban mulatto, and I think Cubans as a whole, especially with our long-standing relationship with the United States, we've had this like love affair with each other. The Republican Party and the Cuban Americans have had the oldest romance for like years, and he knows like that is a dedicated party. He's got the Cuban vote, and the Cubans are most Cuban Americans who vote Republican, who vote for Trump at this point. They're fine to align as a Trump supporter, and with what that comes with, for different reasons, maybe than angry racist white Americans, but it's not that different in my opinion. What separates the two is not that different because they're willing to put aside what's right for the moment because they're still hurt about the past.
You were about to cuss?
A little bit.
I want to share something with you, which is kind of along the lines of the Cubans voting for Trump. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was raised Roman Catholic, staunch Roman Catholic. I mean, we were at church every Sunday and it was a process. And so I know what it is when Joe Biden says he's a Catholic. I don't practice Catholicism anymore. You and I have had conversations about my faith. But I know exactly what Biden is. And I have what I thought were friends, because as you know, a lot of us have lost friends. I don't know if you have,
yes, we have.
But I have lost friends now because of this, because of the issue with Trump, Biden, left, right, whatever. This was on the page of a person who was a dear friend of mine. I mean, I used to attend her children's weddings, and all the flowers would come from my company for them, and all of that. We were like family. Mm-hmm. Catholics. We shared that in common. And somebody put up something for Biden, talking about how Biden didn't want to live in a jungle because of busing or something. I don't know. It was like something from 1746, because Biden's that old. Okay. So I don't know when the hell it was. So somebody puts that up, and this is what the Roman Catholic writes. Okay. I just don't see how he can be anything but in jail or in his basement. What a piece of crap with so many public comments that would have ended any career of another. The worst human being on earth.
Out of touch.
You're a Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
We don't speak that way.
No, I don't.
To be that angry and to be that upset that you've lost your faith, to say things like that because that to me is incoherent. That's an incoherent statement.
It is an incoherent.
That Joe Biden should be. And I felt like responding, but I'm not going there, because Facebook has become the alt-right thing now. I mean, so I don't even bother.
Or alt-left. It's radical either way.
It's kooky. Yeah. So I was going to answer because I wanted to know. I wanted to ask her, why should he be in jail?
Abortion.
Really?
If there is anything that can make a Catholic, staunch Catholic, a by the line, correct Catholic go cross-eyed and lose sight of the prize, it's abortion.
And she has done that with me.
It's abortion. There is that they have that very similar Protestant connection, which is something they have in common. A little history here, folks. Protestant and Catholics don't usually get along. Just saying. Back in the day, the way it used to be, they used to hate each other. But for a Catholic, Roe v. Wade, that's it. I don't even have to keep talking. That enough makes them, which for you and I, who we're pretty, let's play devil's advocate. Let's put ourselves in the Catholic mindset. We understand, I believe, I should not speak for you, but I believe you do understand that there's really one rule that you have to follow as a Catholic. And what is it?
No contraception.
Because they treat others as you would like to be treated.
Yeah.
But
Well, no. Yeah. Well, there's yeah. It falls under the 10 Commandments, but yeah.
There's 10 commandments. There's 10 commandments, and that's really all you got to do, right? Okay, there's a lot you got to do. You also got to pay a lot of money, but there's a lot. There's a lot you got to do.
That really depends on the pew position that you want in the church.
Yes, it is. I think this is important because somebody who does follow us messaged me.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is a subject they wanted us to talk about. So they sent me an article from We Are Me Too, which is a Latino Latinx channel. And they shared a Cuban American is behind the hate group, the Proud Boys, and people of color have questions. And I was thinking, what if me and you tried to answer those questions?
I'm down.
Yeah. All right.
What I find very interesting is, again, like I've told you, I have a very specific way of seeing my faith, and I don't believe in mistakes. And you said at toward the beginning of our conversation tonight, you said, that people have said to you there will be a reckoning. What if this is the reckoning?
To Cubans?
Or part of the reckoning. Yeah. Yeah.
That they're finally,
because like we have, like any Latinx person that feels excluded by Cuban Americans can now say, really? Now you're going to tell me that you're that much better, that you are? What kind of crazy are you people that you think that you can be in a white supremacist group?
that is a valid question.
But do you see the psychological reversal?
I do.
Because then you're going to start a national argument. You're really Juanita, really Fefa y people se van a meter en a national argument to tell people in Ohio that you're white. Really? We're going to do this? Go for it, because they're going to make picadillo out of your ass because you're not white. Excuse me, we are not white.
I would like to say for our viewers, there is, though, if we have whiter skin, we do have privilege. So we do have to say that our race is white. Now,
without a doubt.
That does not mean, I just want to clarify, that does not mean that we are white American and not Latino. That is the issue. The issue is the disconnect. So people of color have questions. Robert, how can a Cuban American how could you explain to a person of color how a Cuban American who is Latino, Latinx, be a part of this group? The hate group, the Proud Boys. A Cuban American is behind the hate group, the Proud Boys, and people of color have questions.
So what's the question? Ask me a question.
My first question to you is, how can a Cuban American justify being a part of this group?
Because we don't consider ourselves of color.
Why not?
This goes way back, and it comes from a very deep-rooted history that we have to that many of us have recognized, Let's give credit where credit is due. Many of us have recognized it. Many of us have not. Okay. And I try to put that onto the older generations that they haven't recognized it. But if you study where race and racism comes from, it originated in Spain. Cuban Americans are, in many cases, first and second generation Spaniards.
Can I pause to ask you a question? Would I be statistically correct in saying that Cubans are actually more Spaniard than other countries in the Caribbean?
You have to qualify more Spaniard, because I think what you're trying to say is less mixed blood. Or am I wrong?
Both. Not only less mixed blood, but also by volume, there are more, just to like condense this. So the United States has a percentage of white Americans, right? Or that
Anglo-Saxons.
That are Anglo-Saxon. Now we don't have more Anglo-Saxons than Great Britain, right? Well, let's just say by density or whatever. In comparison, I would say because of the history and the colonization of Cuba, and from what I've seen of the race breakdown, it had retained more white Spaniard than the other countries.
Okay. I'm going to show you a photograph, okay? What color are these women?
White. White and white.
That's my mother. That's my aunt. And that's my aunt. All first generation Spaniards.
And a lot
of Cuba.
It looks the same.
Exactly. So these are what I refer to as white passing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But people will also push you to say their race, nationality, ethnicity is Cuban.
These believe they are Anglo-Saxon.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Now I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being funny. No. I'm not being double entendre. No, they believe they are Anglo-Saxon. Okay. There's only one left. My mother passed away and this one passed away. But they believe they were of Anglo-Saxony. And if you study Anglo-Saxony, no, you ain't. Okay.
And why is that important to this conversation?
Because the bloodline stayed pure. And what was originally what was originally created by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand to subjugate people and to put them into different sections and classes was that they had to be pure of blood. Mm-hmm. In Spanish, it was literally called limpieza de la sangre. Okay. Mm-hmm. Purity of blood, which we hear to this day.
Here today.
By white supremacists that the President of the United States refuses to even acknowledge that he knows who they are. Okay. But because that ran down the line, and it continued to run down the line from 1470, we end up with this. Mm-hmm. That blood never got mixed. It was never mixed. See, this one died 6 years ago. This one died 7 years ago. This one's still alive. Do you think their blood was ever mixed?
No.
No.
And what would have happened if they married someone who was Black?
What would have happened?
How would their families and communities have reacted?
That would have never happened.
Would have never happened. And I think that's important.
And I'm giving you the Cuban answer.
This is the Cuban answer.
That would have never happened. It just doesn't happen.
No. If a white Cuban that comes from this family line, we're all aware, we're just in this Cuban space because we're getting to the bottom of this answer.
But this is the
yes, this is more pure.
Pure blood VIP first class.
Correct. I have that on my on my paternal grandmother's side, pure. To the point where she was angry that one of her sisters, that she was the only one of her sisters who came out with brown eyes and not blue. And anytime she met somebody who had blue eyes, she would be like, you're prettier than me.
What a complex. Wow.
But she was Spaniard. The profile, the hair, because to her, you could even trace it back a little bit sooner. Her great grandmother was from Spain. So done. You could trace it down the line, pure of blood, no mixing. And we're not saying this to say like, oh, this is something we're proud of. We're just speaking to the community to explain how this complex happens. So
right.
What happens? So now I'm a product of whatever, this community. But so now I still am expected to uphold this standard, right? To a degree. In our
my family. And by members of certain members of my community, yes.
So, Robert, you are part of our Cuban community. I come home with a black boyfriend. What happens?
The first thing is I ask to speak to you privately.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is once I get you privately, I say, what the hell is going on with you? What is wrong with you that you think that you could bring a black person into my house?
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, he's no longer mulatto. He's no longer of color. He's no longer brown. He's no longer all of the things that we're learning about the different colors of the world. He's no longer that. He's black.
He's black.
Because when a Cuban gets mad, if I should speak English, tell me to speak English. But when a Cuban gets mad, ese tipo que está en ese racist group es un negro.
Negro.
Él no es un mulato, ese es un negro que se metió ahí.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I grew up with that being a derogatory word, and I never understood how I was able to sing esa negrita que va caminando, esa negrita que va caminando. Why was that okay? But it's a bad word to say.
Because they made it up as they went along.
Okay. It didn't always exist.
We have made it up as we have gone along.
To create that word, a derogatory word.
Correct. And if you had a conversation, and if Celia Cruz was still alive today, Celia Cruz would tell you the racism that she had to endure in Cuba.
All of this leading up to this Cuban American boy who identifies as mulatto. One more time, just to clarify, what is a mulatto Cuban American? What does that look like? What does that mean?
Mulatto to us is mixed race.
Okay.
Just imagine a Cuban dark-skinned person or an Afro-Cuban who marries with a white-skinned or lighter-skinned Cuban. And then the person comes out what we many times derogatorily and not because we have massive derogatory terms that we use as an everyday term, okay?
Yes.
We have café con leche people, okay? So those two people get together and they have a café con leche, okay?
For our viewers, what is a café con leche?
Coffee with a little bit of cream.
Correct.
Okay? But we're not racists.
No,
I'm getting goosebumps over my body, and it's not the lightning.
No.
That's how horrific our racism is.
It runs deep.
That we don't see. Oh, it doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. That's es café con leche. It doesn't mean anything. What? That's a human being. What do you mean? Eso no es. Are you? You know. So, a mulatto is that mix, that kind of a mix.
So this man, who is in a white supremacist hate group that votes for Trump, is mulatto, which means of mixed race. As Americans, we understand mixed race. And people of color have questions because they identify him as Latino and a person probably of color. With what we talked about, what is the answer, the definitive answer of how, at least for number one, why he is okay or how he sees it. How does he see himself as one of them? How about that? How does he see himself as how does he identify and align with a group that is built on racism and white supremacy?
I cannot, in good conscience, like answer the question because I'm not in his head, but I can make an assumption. I can tell you what I would think he's thinking. What I would think that he's thinking is that that group is not a white supremacist group. There are certain things that if you go to my TikTok page, you'll see a video, and you and I have talked about this before, and I'm going to use some very indiscreet and inappropriate words at this time. So if anybody's watching who has children or anybody around you that don't want to hear this, please take them out of the room now. In 1979, 1980, Ronald Reagan had a campaign manager that was from the Deep South. And he was caught on tape explaining, and I play it in my TikTok. He is caught explaining to the media how racism has evolved in the political arena. What does that mean? And try to keep me on task so I don't lose my frame of mind. Okay. In the 50s, okay, in the 50s, you could say N.
Mm-hmm.
In the 60s, you couldn't say that anymore. So what you had to say was busing. And in the 70s, you couldn't say that anymore. So you had to come up with something new. So what did you come up with? And these are all what we hear in the news and broadcasters say being the dog whistles.
Yes.
These are the dog whistles. Because it went from N, which is blatant in your face, that's what you are. It slowly turned into these dog whistles that are now law and order.
Thank you for saying that.
Ronald Reagan was the law and order president, and he was the first one to use that terminology. And law and order is the dog whistle for we're going to get them. We're going to get them because they're going to break into your houses. They're going to go into your neighborhoods. They're going to go into your suburbs. They're going to rape your kids, and they're going to kill you all. That's what that is.
That brings up two things. I'm going to dial it back because one, that's going to bring us to the debate, and I do want to ask about that because that came up very specifically, law and order. But let's tie this back to this question. So you said that we're making an assumption that this Cuban American boy who supports this white supremacist group does not see it as such. He sees it as what you're saying is law and order.
He may be, again, because I refuse to, I'm not in his head.
No,
he may be confused enough to think that he's in a law and order group.
I'm going to put this into my real life, for example. The way this works.
When he doesn't realize, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that law and order has become the new racist slur.
Well, that's how these things happen over time.
Yes. And I don't know that I'm using the right words, but I understand what I'm saying. I just don't know how to put it into words.
Well, I'm going to put it into a little bit of a quick story. So I'm going to explain it as my abuela, Cuban, will tell you all day and night that she is not racist, right?
Yeah.
Like, a story that many white Americans understand too. I'm not racist, but ... right? I'm not racist, but there shouldn't be disorder in the streets. I'm not racist, but they should behave, right? That's the dog whistle. So I would say that that is very similar to probably this, maybe the Cuban American experience of there's this word ladrones used for the protesters. It's considered derogatory.
Ladrone is a robber.
Right. That's how a word that in our Cuban community here has been used to call the protesters. And
Really?
yeah.
Up in New Jersey?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
That's what the Cuban community, at least the right side, that's what they call the protesters, ladrones.
They're basically just calling them like bank robbers, crooks.
Right.
Thieves. Ladrón is thief.
Right. Why does this matter? Because it's true. So when you hear this from your family, you're not hearing racism. We're not excusing. This kid could be racist for all we know. We have no idea. But when you grow up and you hear this person, they channel that anger back into that Reagan, into something more digestible, a package. Oh, now I sound correct. I'm not racist. I just support law and order.
Bingo.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And then you pass that on to the younger generation. So it moves on. But call a spade a spade. Cuban Americans have racism within their own community. So they will take this on happily.
And
perfect for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a way to soften, and in the 80s, it was a way to soften the blow. But what happens with, and I wish I had an easier way to say it, but it's a way to get people that are ignorant to fall for it.
Yes. Now,
not just Cubans. Not just Cubans. The MAGAs that are out there right now chanting and screaming and yelling and saying law and order, they don't realize that they are saying, or I'm sure a lot of them do, but a lot of them don't realize that they're saying, when I hear Donald Trump say law and order, you don't understand what that does to my blood. My blood pressure literally goes up because I've studied what the process was and what that really means when somebody gets up on a podium and says, I am the law and order president. I know what he's saying.
Yeah, you know exactly what he's saying. So how did you feel about Joe Biden's answer to that question during the debate?
I don't even know that I heard it because I was so
angry.
Yeah. I was so distraught during the whole thing that I don't know that I
digested it.
Yeah.
It was a moderate establishment answer.
Which was? Do you remember?
It was I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something along the lines of I know he refused to say that he would defund the police.
Yes, I heard that. I remember hearing that clearly, that he wasn't for defunding the police. He was for helping the police, giving them assistance.
He sympathized with, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. He sympathized with police officers who do try to do the right thing on a day-to-day basis. He also said that he recognized that there were problems and that needed to be fixed. I do not think people of color or Black American voters bought that answer as enough.
And I also don't think, from all the statistics that I have seen, Biden is not necessarily winning the Black or the Latino vote in droves. They're not coming to him in droves. And as a matter of fact, the African American vote has increased a little bit for Trump. But what we were talking about before was the law and order. I'm sorry, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I just had a moment of understanding this. We could edit this out, but something just kind of hit me. I was thinking, of all people, if there are any people, at least right now in the Latino group, ironically, who should be on the lookout for rhetoric and not having the wool pulled over their eyes, it should be the Cuban American population. We grew up with listening to and keeping our president in check, and how things can shift into authoritarianism like really quickly, like things that other people maybe not necessarily grow up with, but we're 6 years old and we're learning about communist policies and how countries turn into socialist regimes because we're listening to the stories of our family, like you said once with the inventory, and we grew up with these like really difficult concepts and dynamics and understanding of politics. So a people educated and who have experienced a coup in their lifetime, how could they be so susceptible to rhetoric? And it's kind of ironic because part of what happened in Cuba was due to race too. It was also class. It was also racial.
It was class. I don't think it was race. Why do you say it was race? It was class.
Because who had the money?
Well, yeah, I can see that. The upper classes had the money, but the upper class tends to be.
And then, but then who came here then?
The upper class.
And they were. Do you see what I mean? It's like a flow chart. Like they were the upper class from Cuba that is largely white because it happened to be.
If I understand what you're saying, you're making quite a statement. Quite a statement. And I think I understand what you're saying, which is that this is what I'm understanding. Tell me if I'm wrong. The upper class lost everything they had to the lower class. The lower class was inferior. So the upper class, who felt superior, now had to come and live as inferiors in another country, while the inferiors of the country that they ruled were now reaping the rewards that they felt that belonged to them. Is that close to what you're trying to tell me?
Yes. And then
they are terrified that will happen again here.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a strong statement that you're making.
And it's like they're making the same mistake.
I'm not saying that I agree with it, but you've given me a lot to think about, mm-hmm. And I had never thought about it in that way because it's it's very realistic, and it's, but
the rhetoric sounds the same. I worked for my money. I don't want my money taken from somewhere else. They align perfectly with the Republican Party. And it's not far off from a racial warfare. We've already said that we have racism within the community. So that already exists. We already have a built-in scapegoat.
What other questions have you had?
The other question is, why do Latinos, we've answered this, but I don't think we've answered on this podcast, so I think it's worth delving into. Why is it that the Latino vote is still polling Republican, especially in Miami-Dade County? And specifically, what it is it seems the most confusion seems to be coming from other Latinos and people of color.
Let's distinguish between which Latinos we're talking about. Okay? Mm-hmm. Because if we're talking about Cubans specifically, I think they're slowly starting to change over.
Okay.
Slowly and in a small, I'm not saying the whole community is switching over, because like I've told you, I sit on my balcony on a Sunday and I see the caravans coming by with the Trumpers, and I can tell, they're my age or younger, and I'm 50 years old and they're in their 40s and their 30s, and there's young people and, all of that crap. And they bought into the Lee Atwaters of this world. Lee Atwater is the person that worked for Ronald Reagan that said, and it's worth repeating for those that hadn't joined us before, Lee Atwater is the person that explained to the media before, in the 50s, we could say N, In the 60s, we couldn't say N, so we had to say busing, busing, busing. And then in the 70s, we couldn't say busing, 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 so we turned it into law and order. And that law and order has stayed with us until today. So those people that are still voting for Trump, or that are still, how did you frame the question? Skewing right or Trump? Those Latinos that are skewing right are skewing right for law and order.
But why is it? What distinguishes Cubans apart? The other Latino voting blocs are left. There really isn't a doubt. Is it just the communism thing?
Education.
Cubans aren't educated?
No. I think that when you look at the diaspora and the exodus that we've gone through, when you write it down, when you look at the first diaspora, which was the Peter Pan children, those children are separated from their parents to save their lives from communism and socialism. That's what they believe, right?
Yep.
The second diaspora are what in Miami were known as the PAA flights. They were the Pan American flights, because Pan American Airlines, which no longer exists, was the airline that flew them out of Cuba, and they were called the Freedom Flights. Okay, that was in the 60s, late 60s to early 70s. And then in the 80s, in 1979, Jimmy Carter allows the Mariel boat lift to take place. So from 60 to 70 to late 70 to 80 to 90 to today, we've had a revolving door of people coming in and coming out and coming in and coming out and coming in and coming out and coming in. Yeah, people are getting educated. One of my best friends in my life is my brother, came in at Mariel, and he went to school, and he's an American literature, an English lit teacher in the Miami-Dade public school system. Speaks English better than you and I, and it actually does voiceovers as his part-time job. So yeah, there is education, but as far as that level of education that I can say, where it was ingrained as part of the culture, in Asian culture, they kept what we lost. Because back during the Egyptian times, you see, the Egyptians created the pyramids. How did they do that? Nobody knows. But the Egyptians were incredibly educated people. They taught the Greeks.
They did.
It wasn't the other way around.
A lot of people like to write that narrative, though. But
right. Because it was not convenient in the 17 and 1800s to teach white people that mathematics came from Africa. So they erased that part and they said it came from the Greeks.
Just like it wasn't convenient to show Jesus as a
negro. Okay? Because that's what he is.
Café con leche.
So education was so important and so incredibly valuable that the Greeks had to go to Africa and spend at least 8 years in Africa, sitting there, waiting to see if the Egyptians would trust them enough to teach them math. That's how important education was. You didn't share education with just anyone. What's education to us here? Take it or leave it.
Garbage.
It's right. So
anything, sometimes it's elitist, a waste of time. You should
right. Of course. You can do a lot more with your time if you didn't spend it
everybody needs to go to college. That's not for everybody. That's not worth the time. You can learn a trade. You shouldn't be learning a trade.
Right. And it was reserved.
People, sure, but everyone deserves to go learn a trade, but you could also go to have an education too. You can have both.
Correct. And trade, but learning a trade was part of education, and not everybody could learn a trade. It was going back to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. If you were a Jew or you were a Muslim, you could not learn a trade. You could not go to college. You could not acquire wealth. You could not buy property. Does that sound familiar? I mean, hello. So in the fabric of their culture, Asians took education and made it one of the most important, or kept it as the most important, one of the most important credos in their life, you
And it
know,
shows.
family, education, money, food, whatever, however you want to put that in the hierarchy.
It shows in their infrastructure. It shows in their innovation. It shows.
Now tell me how Cubans did it. It wasn't a priority.
No.
It wasn't a priority. Who had it, who had it in Latino America? Mexico.
Mexican.
Mexico. The Mayans, the Incas,
Aztecs.
the Aztecs.
Mm.
Cubans? Los Hatuey. No, I don't. I don't. And I'm not making fun of that. I'm just saying that that's a group of people that comes out, gets hammered by a mass exodus, repeated mass exoduses. Yeah, they do have the elites that they do send to school. And we end up with senators and we end up with congressmen. And those senators and those congressmen, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Los Díaz-Balart, those people go up to Washington and they write certain laws to protect our people. Wet foot, dry foot, the Pan Am flights. We run our own government. You know, we have our own banks. We created our own system,
Yes, we did.
which gave us even more of. And what's the worst thing you can do? We're living it right now. And I don't mean this for every single Cuban, but give power or give title to one ignoramus and watch what happens. Watch what happens.
I mean, we watched it the other night.
Right. And I've been in the business world for many, many years, longer than you've been alive. And we've always had that saying, give a title to an idiot and you're in trouble. Just give them a title. You know, and I'm not saying that Cubans are idiots. I'm just saying that Cubans have had that, you know, they were smart enough to get, you know, certain people into Congress and certain people into the Senate and to be able, that's how we wrote the embargo. The Helms-Burton Law. Do you know who Jesse Helms was?
I do not. Who is Jesse Helms?
Oh, honey. Jesse Helms was one of the most racist senators in the history of the United States. Anti-busing, anti-integration, you name it. Jesse Helms was.
You name it, Jesus.
Till the day he died. So Jesse Helms wrote the law with it was Helms and Burton. Those two senators wrote the embargo law for Cuba.
I did not know that. I did not know a racist was behind the embargo law.
What a coinky-dink.
Not a coincidence. I stick by my theory. I'm going to edit this part, but I stick by my theory. My last question I'm going to ask, because I think I'd like to put this up today. How does this make you? How did you feel when you saw the news? How did that make you feel?
When I saw what news?
When were we, you know, like me, I was getting news about this Cuban American boy.
I didn't believe it. I said, there's a mistake. There's a mistake because it's so incongruent. It's like oil and vinegar. When you put them in the bottle, they don't mix. Huh?
Versus I had the opposite reaction.
You bought into it right away?
Oh, yeah. I was like, of course. Absolutely.
Then call me ignorant or old or too busy to pay attention. I don't know. But I was like, that's got to be a mistake.
No.
Because my head, which still has to work.
You know what?
We've talked about.
I don't think it's an ignorance thing. I think it's you and I are both on a rare end of our community, and we endlessly have hope that there is no way.
But I was gonna say, I still have to work at this because it goes back to what our other guests have said on our shows, like Leva. you know, it's so ingrained in our psyche that the first thing that I thought, and I'll say it in Spanish because those who speak Spanish that watch this will understand what I'm saying. The first thing that I thought when I saw the picture was, ¿qué hace un negro en ese grupo? Eso no tiene nada que ver. It was like, what's a giraffe doing in a swimming pool? I don't you know what I mean? It was like a giraffe in a swimming pool. What? It doesn't swim. I don't. So to me, it was like, it was completely incongruent until time passed and I saw it more in the news and I went, okay, something's weird here. Right. So to me, it was, yeah. And that's part of the uncomfortable conversations that we have to have and the processes that I have to go through as a racist myself, as a person who has those thoughts.
It just reminded me of when I got lit up when I said that the Cuban American community was very different on TikTok from others. The most controversial thing I said was that we were privileged in our immigration status. Okay. There's a lot of nuances to that. What I specifically meant is there was privilege in our pathway to citizenship. We had certain rights, like you mentioned earlier, of how that went down versus today, ICE, deportation, insecurity, family separation. It's a different experience. It's a different experience that Cuban Americans cannot relate to when they immigrated. That's what I spoke to. And then that led to me speaking to what we spoke to earlier with the colorism and the Latino community and the racism. And, you know, this is not just Cuban Americans. It's the Spaniards did a damage to a lot of
the whole world. The whole world. No, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being funny. They did it to the whole world because of their original theory.
Original sin.
You can call it that. We end up with the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
We end up with Portugal being one of the biggest traders in slaves, or the biggest trader in slaves in the world. Brazil has an entire slave population that we don't think about. We don't think about. The last country to abolish slavery was Brazil. You know who was second to last? The United States of America. We don't think about those things. You know? And if you study Brazil, the favelas, there's only 9 families in Brazil that run Brazil.
That is we could open up a whole can of worms.
But that relates to everything that we talk about with the politics here in the United States, where the top 1% gets the majority. Brazil's the same. It's the same freaking thing. We're 33 days from the election. Mm-hmm. The only thing you can do right now is vote, and a very big
if you can
in person, absolutely. And I really think he's an anomaly. But again, that goes back to what you described about you and I, that we tend to be a little bit, you know, soft-hearted when it comes to that. But if you're in the law and order camp, then I don't really have anything to discuss with you. And if you're going to come at me and you're going to put me, you see, by my privilege, by my passing privilege, because let's be perfectly clear, I don't have privilege. I have passing privilege. Because I'll show you the other side of this, because my mother married another one that if you see that picture, you'll go, okay, something's wrong in this picture. Okay.
There's a default to every story.
Right. So if somebody comes at me with that and says, you know, well, you're like them, I can answer that at any time, because I'm nothing like that person. And it's about educating people. It's about education. And the Cuban comment that I was making about Cubans and education and what is the fabric of people's culture, it's not that Cubans are ignorant or stupid or brutos. It's that education is what we are losing in massive chunks. Like the icebergs are melting. We're losing it in this country where it's just disappearing. And if we continue to do that, we'll end up with un negro in that group saying, ese es un negro, pero no es negro porque es cubano. So it's okay that he's in the white supremacist group because he represents us because we're white, but we're not really white because we came from Spain and we lived in Cuba.
But it's what happened. Without education, that's what happened.
That's what happens when you have no education, when you do not seek to understand, when you do not seek to say, let me try to understand what the hell's going on here. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification button
so you can see our videos every single week. Thank you for your support.
We really encourage respectful and powerful discussions about these topics that hopefully interest you as well. Please leave your comments below or follow us on social media.